An Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francois de Sales, Book 3, Chapter 35. That we must be faithful in things great and small. The bridegroom in the Song of Songs says that his spouse has ravished his heart with one of her eyes and one hair of her neck. Of all the human body, no part is so preeminent, whether for its mechanism or its power, as the eye, none less important than the hair. Therefore, the divine bridegroom implies that he does not only accept the great deeds of devout persons, but also the lowest and least, and that to serve him well, we must pay great attention alike to great and mighty things, and to those which are small and lowly, since through both alike we may lose or win his love. Be ready, then, to suffer heavy afflictions, if need be, martyrdom itself, for Christ's sake, determined to give to him all that is dearest to you when he pleases to take it, father, mother, brother, husband, wife, child, the sight of your eyes, and your life itself. To all such submissions your heart should be disposed. But, meanwhile, as divine providence does not try you with such severe and heavy afflictions, and does not require your eyes, give him at least your hair. That is to say, meekly endure all little evils, trifling inconveniences, and unimportant losses which happen daily. For by using these little opportunities to a good and loving purpose, you will overcome your heart and have it entirely under control. All such trifles as the daily chances of life, this headache, toothache, or fever, the perversity of a husband or wife, the breakage of a glass, this slight, the loss of a ring, handkerchief or glove, the little inconvenience of going early to bed and rising early to pray and receive communion, the little shame at being publicly noticed in certain religious observances, all these and similar trifling annoyances will, if they be taken and received cheerfully, please that divine goodness which is promised to the faithful, an ocean of bliss in return for a cup of cold water. And inasmuch as these opportunities are perpetually occurring, their right use affords an abundant means of laying up spiritual treasures. In reading in the life of St. Catherine of Siena, of all her visions and raptures, her sacred wisdom and her discourses, I should not doubt that with the eye of contemplation she had ravished the heart of her heavenly bridegroom. But at the same time I delighted to find her tending to all the lowly household chores in her father's house, turning the spit, lighting the fire, cooking and baking, with a heart full of love and aspiration toward God. Nor do I value less the humble meditations which occupied her while engaged in such lowly offices than the ecstasies and raptures which she so often enjoyed, and which were perhaps granted as the reward of her humility and self-abnegation. In her heart she considered that ministering to her Father was like Martha ministering to our Lord. Her mother she likened to the Blessed Virgin, and her brothers to the apostles, thus spiritually serving the heavenly household, and finding great sweetness in her humble duties, because she knew in them she performed the will of God. Hence, I would have you learn how important it is that all our actions, however trifling, be offered to his divine majesty. And to this end, imitate that virtuous woman who is described by King Solomon, who, while she stretched out her hands to great and honorable things, did not neglect her spindle and distaff. apply yourself to great things, in prayer and meditation, in the sacraments, in telling of the love of God and spreading His knowledge in all hearts, and in all such important works as befit your vocation. But do not neglect your spindle and distaff. That is to say, practice those lowly, unobtrusive virtues which spring like flowers from the foot of the cross, such as visiting the poor, ministering to the sick, household cares and the labors involved therein. And then you never will be idle. Meanwhile, intersperse all such occupations with pious reflections, after the example of St. Catherine. Great occasions of serving God only rarely offer themselves. Small occasions perpetually occur. And Christ Himself has said, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in that which is greater." If then you do all in the name of God, you will do all well, whether you eat or whether you drink, whether you are engaged in honorable or menial offices. If you conduct them rightly, you may greatly advance your salvation, doing all things because such is the will of God. Chapter 36. On the necessity of a just and reasonable mind. Reason is the essential distinction of man, and yet it is rare to find really reasonable men. The more so that self-love hinders reason and leads us into numberless trifling but dangerous acts of injustice, which, like the little foxes spoken of in the Canticles, spoil the vines. For because they are trifling, we do not heed them, and being numerous, they do great mischief. Let us seek some instances. We accuse our neighbors in little things, but excuse ourselves in great things. We seek to buy cheap and sell dear. We demand justice toward others, but towards ourselves mercy and indulgence. We would have none find fault with our words, but we are sensitive and captious to the words of others. We would eagerly make our neighbor give up any property we want and are willing to pay for. Is it not more just that he should retain his property and leave us our money? We are displeased with him because he will not study our conveniences. Has he not rather reason to complain of us for striving to inconvenience him? If we are addicted to some particular duty, we neglect the rest, and only pursue that which suits our taste. If one of our dependents is unattractive or displeasing to us, we are never satisfied with anything he does, but are perpetually finding fault and worrying him. And on the contrary, we have an ever-ready excuse for the one that we like. Some parents have an aversion for a virtuous child on account of some bodily defect, while they show undue preference to one who is attractive and full of vice. So we esteem the rich above the poor, albeit they are virtuous and well-conditioned. We are even guided in our preference by fine clothes. We are particular in exacting our own rights, and expect others to be more yielding with regard to theirs. We maintain our own rank punctiliously, but would have others be humble and condescending. We are ready to complain of our neighbor, but we would have no one complain of us. We think much of what we do for others and little of what they do for us. In short, we resemble the Paphlagonian partridge, which is said to have two hearts. For toward ourselves we have a gentle, liberal, courteous heart, but towards our neighbor one that is hard, rigorous, and severe. We have one measure whereby to weigh all that appertains to ourselves as advantageously as possible, and another for our neighbor as disadvantageous as may be. Now, Holy Scripture says that deceitful lips speak with a double heart, and that to have two weights, one heavy for receiving, the other light for giving, is an abomination to the Lord. Always be equal and just in your deeds. Put yourself in your neighbor's place and him in yours, and then you will judge fairly. When you buy, act as though you were the seller, and when you sell, as though you were the buyer, and then you will buy and sell with justice. These acts of injustice seem small because they do not demand restitution, as we only seek our own advantage to the utmost limit of honesty. But nevertheless they require correction, for after all they are but cheating tricks, and offend against reason and charity. And no one ever lost anything by generosity, honor, and courtesy, which are the fruits of a noble, upright, straightforward heart. Frequently, therefore, examine your heart, whether it is so disposed toward your neighbor as you would have his disposed towards you if you were to change places. For this is the true test. Trajan's intimates blamed him for rendering the imperial majesty, as they conceived, too accessible. How then, he replied, should I not seek to be such toward private individuals as I would wish the emperor to be, were I a private individual myself? Chapter 37. Of Desires. Everyone knows that we must avoid evil desires, for by their indulgence we become evil likewise. But I would urge you not to desire these things which are dangerous to the soul, such as balls and similar risky amusements, honors, etc., offices, visions, and raptures. In all such things there is a great risk of vanity and delusion. Neither indulge in longings after events which as yet are far distant, for they do but distract and weary the heart, often disturbing it seriously. If a young man earnestly desires an office which is at present unattainable, to what end his longing? If a married woman wishes to follow the religious life, what's the use of her wish? Or, if I would wish to buy my neighbor's land, and he being unwilling to part with it, do I not waste my time in wishing? If when I am ill I give way to the wish to minister or preach, or visit other sick persons, or perform the duties of the healthy, are not my wishes fruitless, since it is not in my power to execute them? And meanwhile these useless wishes impede others which I ought to have. The wish to be very patient, very resigned, obedient, mortified, and gentle under my sufferings, which is what, for the time being, God requires of me. But we often, in our unreasonable wishes, resemble women with child, who ask for cherries in winter or grapes in the spring. No person who has an appointed duty or vocation should indulge in wishing for some different manner of life than that which is suitable to it and its indispensable conditions. For such indulgence disturbs the mind and enfeebles it in the performance of its necessary duties. If I wish for a Carthusian solitude, I waste my time and allow this desire to take the place of that which ought to occupy me, namely, to fulfill my actual office of bishop profitably. I would not even admit of longings after a better intellect or a sounder judgment, for such longings are vain, and supplant those which every one should have, to cultivate what he has, such as it is. Nor would I encourage a desire for the means of serving God which he has denied us, but rather faithfully make use of those we have. Of course, I am speaking of such desires as occupy the heart. There's no harm in common wishes if they do not become habitual. Do not wish for crosses unless you have borne those well which have already been offered to you. It is a mistake to wish for martyrdom while we do not have courage to endure a sharp word. The enemy of souls often seeks to distract us with desires after distant trials which will never offer themselves, in order to distract our mind from those present circumstances whence, however trifling, we might derive real benefit. In fancy, we combat against jungle monsters, while practically we allow the worms on our daily path to destroy us for lack of thought. Never seek temptations. It is presumptuous and rash to do so. But prepare your heart to await temptations with courage and defend yourself when they do come. Variety and excess of food always overloads the digestion, and if it is weakly, ruins the digestion. Do not overload your soul with desires, neither with worldly wishes which are injurious, or even spiritual wishes which will hinder you. When the soul is purged and set free from evil tempers, it experiences a great hunger after spiritual things, and eagerly desires all manner of pious exercises in mortification, penitence, charity, and prayer. Such an appetite is a good sign, but take care that you're able to digest all that you would eat. With the help of your spiritual father, select from amongst all such practices those which are suitable to you, and for the present follow and make the most of them, in which case God will supply you with others in due season, and thus you will not waste your time in fruitless wishes. I do not bid you to put aside all good desires, but only regulate them, to execute those which are practicable at the present moment, and lay up those which are impracticable in store for a fitting season. And this I say alike of spiritual and temporal desires, for by this means alone we can go on calmly and without distraction. End of chapter 37.